Rob doesn't repress his emotions. He rewinds them again and again. High Fidelity is not about a man avoiding heartbreak. It's about a man swimming in it, soaked in memories, stuck in cycles, trying to figure out what went wrong by replaying every moment that might explain why he was left behind. This is not a story about toxic masculinity. It's also not a story about a sociopath. It's a story about emotional confusion, about ego, vulnerability, grief dressed as reflection. It's about a man who wants to be understood, but can't quite understand himself yet. This is the psychology of High Fidelity, and why for so many men, growth does not look like strength. It looks like finally feeling what they have been trying to think their way around. Rob is not emotionally unavailable. He's emotionally stuck. Rob doesn't numb himself for distractions. He obsesses, loops, lists. He's not afraid of feelings. He's afraid of not being enough to be loved in spite of them. This isn't emotional avoidance. It's emotional entrapment. Psychology calls this rumination. The passive, repetitive focus on distress, which is common in individuals experiencing unresolved grief or shame. His top 5 breakups list isn't a joke. They are emotional relics, proof that he's been hurt, and maybe that he's worthy of being hurt that much. For instance, when Rob is recounting his breakup with Laura in the record store, his obsessive retelling reveals not just pain, but a belief that he deserves to suffer in the name of love. He isn't letting go because he hasn't figured out how to make sense of his own pain. This romanticizing of sadness is sometimes linked to melancholic ideation in psychoanalytic theory, where the pain of love lost becomes a source of meaning, even identity. And Rob isn't hiding from emotion, he's buried in it, and he does not know how to dig himself out. But if he's feeling so much, then why does he feel so hard to reach? Rob knows that he is part of the problem, but he doesn't admit it until he is ready to lose everything. And that's the root of emotional stuckness. Not a lack of awareness, but a battle between ego and heart. In psychodynamic terms, this could be seen as defensive intellectualization, using thought and logic to distance oneself from emotional pain. Rob is insightful, self-aware, articulate, but none of that makes him emotionally available. Because healing doesn't come from identifying your patterns. That's just the first step. It comes from being vulnerable enough to change them, which is the following steps after awareness. Take his conversation with Dick and Barry at the record store when they question his choices. His refusal to admit vulnerability to those closest to him. Even though he's aware of his flaws, he protects his ego. Rob's initial defensiveness comes from his pride. Rob's relationship to his past is poetic, romantic, but it also keeps him trapped. He sees Sophie not just as an ex, but as a symbol of who he was, and maybe who he failed to become. This is a form of identity foreclosure, where someone's sense of self is built through relationships rather than independent development. And that's why every breakup feels like a breakdown. He is not just losing the woman, he is losing himself. And that's why he's so afraid to commit. Because the next failure might be the one that breaks his narrative entirely. When Rob shows up at his ex's door, replaying those past memories in search of answers, he's not just searching for closure, he's searching for a past that has defined him. His visit to Sophie's apartment, watching her with her new partner, exposes his inability to move on. proving how deeply he has anchored his identity in lost love. For some men, heartbreak becomes the only space where sadness is allowed, socially and individually. What High Fidelity gets right is subtle but very profound. It doesn't villainize Rob, it humanizes him. It shows us a man who was never taught to hold space for his emotions without collapsing into them. A man who equates feelings with weakness. A man who wants connection, but doesn't know how to offer it without self-sabotage. This is what psychologists call restrictive emotionality, a gender role-strained term that describes how men are socially conditioned to suppress emotions, leading to increased loneliness and mental health struggles. Rob doesn't need to man up. He needs permission to feel, to grieve, to stop performing strength, and start practicing vulnerability. This is most evident in Rob's emotionally charged scene with Laura, when he finally lets down his guard. As he opens up about his own vulnerability in the face of losing her, it's not about apologizing. It's about sharing a moment where the strong persona breaks and we see the real man behind the ego. Growth doesn't look like triumph. It looks like softness. By the end of the film, Rob hasn't become a different person, but he's softened. He starts to take accountability, to reflect without wallowing, to see his patterns, not as proof that he is doomed, but as places where he can begin again. In psychotherapy, this is a critical shift from externalizing blame to internalizing responsibility. A sign of real emotional growth. He stops making lists and he starts making space for love and maybe for the man that he wants to be. The final scene in the record store, when Rob decides to take his first step towards reconciling with Laura, is a pivotal moment. It's not about fixing everything at once, but about recognizing the need to start somewhere. That small gesture, no longer running from his feelings, makes a significant shift in his journey towards emotional honesty. So Rob's story isn't about failure. It isn't about a narcissistic sociopath. It isn't about a nice guy trope. It's about emotional delay, about what happens when men are told to analyze their pain, but never taught how to sit with it. And for many men, the pain doesn't explode. It loops in playlists, in top fives, in quietly grieving what could have been, instead of saying, I'm hurting and I don't want to lose you again. High Fidelity reminds us that emotional depth is not the same as emotional availability. That vulnerability is more than confession, it's connection. Because growth isn't about becoming someone new, it's just becoming honest. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!